Cryptography. Cryptography is the art of creating and breaking codes. It is almost as old as civilization itself. For as long as you can remember, people have wanted to keep secrets from one another, and cryptography is one of the best ways to do that. Now, before we begin, there are some terms we should become clear on. First off is cipher. A cipher is an algorithm or equation that we can put text into and get a coded message out of. A cipher is the most simple kind of encoding device. Second is an encryption key. An encryption key is an external solution that solves a coded message. Third is tabula recta. A tabula recta is a table with letters on it that resembles a multiplication table. It is used to aid in cipher creation. Fourth is cryptographic break. A cryptographic break is a solution that uses logic to accurately determine the contents of an encoded message. Now that you know the terms, let's dive into the history of cryptography. The oldest known example of cryptography comes from ancient Egypt. In the tomb of Khnumhotep II, an Egyptian pharaoh, archaeologists found odd hieroglyphs. Further investigations into these hieroglyphs revealed that they were just corruptions of regular hieroglyphs. The purpose of these corrupted hieroglyphs is unclear, but many historians point to this as the first case of cryptography in human history. The Arthashastra, a book of Indian statecraft from around the 2nd century BCE, is another source of early cryptography. The book describes a group of spies that would communicate with each other using a kind of secret writing. The next real development in codes was the Caesar cipher. The Caesar cipher was created and used by Julius Caesar, and is widely considered one of the most famous ciphers in history. The cipher is really rather simple, and can be used by just about anyone. You simply take each letter in the text to be encrypted, and substitute with the letter letters down in the alphabet. For example, A becomes D, B becomes E, C becomes F, and so on. The website Brangle has a great enciphering tool if you want to try it out for yourself, and is the one that I used in this video. This is what is known as a substitution cipher, because it uses one letter as a substitute for another. Substitution ciphers are rather crude and can be broken by observing the frequency that letters appear in messages. In the European world, cryptography fell by the wayside after the fall of Rome, and it wasn't until the 16th century that things picked up again. The Végrenier cipher, often misattributed to Blaise de Végrenier, was first conceived by Giovan Battista Belazzo in 1553. It uses an encryption key instead of a cipher pattern. The Végrenier cipher uses multiple cipher alphabets created by a tabula recta and a key that allowed the user to switch cipher alphabets every letter. Both the sender of the coded message and the receiver would have a phrase that would allow them to translate the encoded message. This phrase is known as an encryption key. Belazzo's cipher was poorly executed, but the idea of encryption keys revolutionized the world of cryptography, and similar keys are used to this day in modern computer encryption. Cryptography really took off with the introduction of electricity and the telegraph in the 1800s. Morse code, of course, deserves a mention here, as it allowed for people to communicate across vast distances, but the code itself was widely used and not for cryptographic purposes. More important was the Hebron rotor machine. Developed by one Edward Hugh Hebron before World War I, it used electricity to move a rotor, and through processes entirely too complex to describe here, encrypt a message. Unfortunately, the machine's codes could still be broken by analyzing its letter frequency. The most important thing that the rotor machine did was lay the groundwork for the brilliant Enigma machine. I could easily devote an entire video to the Enigma machine, but instead I have to live with a simple paragraph. The Enigma machine was developed by the Germans and used 3 and later 4 rotors like the ones in Hebron's machine, and was widely considered unbreakable. Its way of encoding was so complex that there were over 150 million combinations of the 10 pairs of the 26 letters in the alphabet that it could spit out. You could see why codebreakers were skeptical that anyone would be able to break Enigma's codes. In 1932, however, things changed. Some Polish codebreakers managed to use mathematics to create an algorithm and reverse engineer the machine in order to break its codes. However, at the outbreak of World War II, Enigma was made even more complex, and the variables became too large for the Poles to calculate easily, so in 1938 they reached out to the Allies to help them. This was a fortunate choice, as war broke out less than a year later. English codebreakers at Bletchley Park worked tirelessly through the beginning of the war to break the increasingly more complex Enigma. Alan Turing, a Cambridge mathematician, was fascinated with computing and provided much of the thought that went into creating the electromechanical machine that eventually broke Enigma once and for all. The codebreakers of Bletchley captured and broke codes throughout the war, and the data they acquired, called Ultra, allowed the Allies many victories over the Axis powers. It is here where mainstream communications and cryptography become more intertwined. Cryptography had always depended on communication, but before Alan Turing, communication had never depended on cryptography. Turing's machines and theories laid out the foundation for modern computer sciences. Turing's code-breaking machines were some of the first modern computers as well, since they ran off electricity instead of steam, which many early computers used for power. With the framework laid down by Turing's work and the discovery of the transistor, the modern computer was born. Just some background on transistors. Transistors are the thinking part of a computer and work by existing in either an on or off position. This means that we cannot easily communicate with them, and necessitated the creation of the binary communication system, which allows us to interface with computers more easily. Of course, binary was based off of the 17th century work of Gottfried Leibniz, who thought that binary mathematics was the basis of God's creation of the universe. If his name sounds familiar, it is because he is often credited with the discovery of calculus. While the initial history of computing is more complicated than what I have laid out here, not much of it has to do with cryptography, so I won't go into more detail about computing. Instead, I will skip ahead to the 1970s. IBM at the time was the supplier of most of the world's business computers, and it began to hear from its clients that they wanted to keep their data safe, probably from all three of the people who owned computers at the time. Jokes aside, IBM created the Lucifer cipher, which went on to become the international standard for encryption technology. Lucifer was thought to be unbreakable until 1997, when it was brute forced. In cryptography, brute forcing is cramming every single possible combination of characters into a cipher until the decryption is revealed. This was made possible by the drastic increase in computing power seen after the 1970s. In the year 2000, a new encryption standard was adopted, called AES, or the Advanced Encryption Standard. It is currently considered unbreakable by modern technological standards, and it has no known cryptographic break. Brute forcing even its weakest encryption level would take longer than the amount of time that the universe had existed. A paper published in 2002 claimed to have found a break, but this claim has since been proven false. On the horizon, new computing technologies such as quantum and photonic computers promise even more powerful encryption software and even more interesting codes.